Look, good morning, everyone. Woman Jekka, welcome to the third Nelson Mandela Youth Leadership Summit. The theme for the summit today is young people leading with optimism through the pandemic and beyond. And I want to welcome you as you join us from many different schools. And this year, as we're Zooming it, also from several different nations. Now, I'm Marg Hepworth. I'm the founder of the Gandhi Experiment, and I'm your MC for this morning. And I'll be leading you through what I'm sure will prove to be an exciting, informative, and motivating morning. Nelson Mandela told us that we all need to rise above our own expectations of ourselves. Not the expectations of our parents, nor our classmates, not of our work colleagues, but the expectations we place upon ourselves. Mandela was challenging us to step up, to do more, to be more. And this is exactly what today is all about. So in listening to some remarkable speakers who are experts in their fields, we want to find ourselves taking on the challenge to step up. I wonder if you know the South African concept of Ubuntu, if anyone has heard of that before. I know there's many here today who do know. Ubuntu is a South African word meaning humanity, or more beautifully put, I am because we are. It's the belief in a universal bond of sharing that connects all humanity. And I know that I believe in that bond. Now, the Nelson Mandela Youth Leadership Summit is brought to you by Future Voices, who work in collaboration with the Nelson Mandela Foundation of South Africa. And today it's partnered by the Gandhi Experiment and the Centre for Optimism. Future Voices primarily works out of Shepparton and has created some remarkable programs working with diverse multicultural communities and particularly helping young people forge a strong pathway forward in their lives. Excitingly, Future Voices has been granted permission to open the Nelson Mandela Learning Centre in Shepparton. And we look forward to the day when they can showcase the life of Mandela and bring this powerful learning into more and more people's lives. Now, our speakers for today, I told you we have this incredible lineup. We have Victor Purton, who you've all sort of met now, who is the Chief Optimist Officer of the Centre for Optimism. Ken Murray is the principal of the Greater Shepparton Secondary College, the Wanganui Park campus. Dr. Kenny is with us. He's a board member of Future Voices. Aaron Machano, who is a young leader. He's the CEO of Leader of Tomorrow. Andrew Cumston is the director of the Victoria State Office Department of Foreign Affairs of the Australian Government. And Michael Klein, who is the USA Consul General in Melbourne. Dr. Amanda Caples is Victoria's lead scientist. Karen Sobels is president of the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are in for a big morning, people. We have with us Dr. Apollo, the chair, and members of the board of Future Voices. Jada, I would love to invite you now to do something very important for us all, and this is to share the welcome for country.
Lupa galka anganya nara nawu wumaraman bangarang kalitaban moira yalapna kwat kwat yalaba yalaba ingalium iliang rong yota yota waka muma bengala bome inga wutaningalan waka ganya wuta naranahana. Welcome, friends. You're upon Yoda land. Take pleasure in our land. Respect all you see.
Thank you, Jada. That was wonderful. And I'm going to tell you that is the first time I have actually heard the welcome to country in
language. Yeah.
Yeah, well done. It's stunningly beautiful. And even though we may not understand every word, we feel what you are saying. And I think this speaks to the heart and soul of this country. Right? And the respect. So thank you so much for beginning.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let's keep going. The Centre for Optimism tells us that there's a huge groundswell for change right now. They don't call it the new normal, they call it a better normal. And whilst we are living in unsettling and unusual times, COVID-19 has given many of us plenty of quiet days, bringing upon us a global pause. And amid the fear and sometimes frightening consequences, we've also been privy to a world of change when humans are sent to their rooms, when nature is flourishing. Now, COVID-19 has given us time to think, where do we see the turns in the path of humanity? People are saying they want more kindness, more equity, more justice, but not only for humans, respect for all. And I think that's what the Welcome to Country speaks of, respect for all, for others, for self, for our planet. So how do we bring these human attributes into our political, economic, and societal systems to elicit real change? Now, we're no longer simply talking about a need for change. We all know why we need to change. It's time for action. So how will you be part of the change? How will we collectively co-create this dream into a reality? So as we've heard, we have this incredible lineup of speakers who will help us unpack ideas so we can more clearly see our future shaping before us, and you can feel more confident about your role for positive change in our world. Each speaker will speak for about 7 minutes, and then we'll move into breakout groups where you'll be asked to reflect on what you've heard and shape questions to ask the speaker to tease out even more useful information from them. This is your time to think and deeply and engage. So take this opportunity whilst we have these speakers with us. We'll go to Ken. Now Ken is the principal of Greater Shepparton Secondary College, Wanganui, I'm saying that properly, Park Campus. And Ken will share with us lessons for the future, the impacts and implications of the Nelson Mandela legacy. Now, at the end of 2020, at the end of this year, Ken will be retiring. I wonder if he's retiring because of 2020. No, he's been in 40 years of service in education. That in itself is just remarkable, Ken. We'd love to hear from you now. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. And you did a very good job with the Wanganui pronunciation as well. Look, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. And yes, they are in unusual times. So here we are, I'm looking at a screen, and I just noted I've put in an early nomination for the most boring background. Sorry about that. But at least you won't be distracted by anything back there. And I would much rather be in a personal space with you or sharing a personal connection, but clearly these are the times that we're in, and we'll absolutely make the best of it and look forward with positivity to a better future. So I've been asked to provide some insight into what I believe our young leaders might need now and in the future, and also to reflect on some of my leadership journey. If I could give you each one gift that would help make a difference to your life and to help shape that life. I'm talking to the young people here. It wouldn't be a new phone. It wouldn't be a new car for those of you who have just turned 18 and are ready to hit the roads, but it would be a gift of optimism. And that gift of optimism would change and would shape your life. And when you combine that with something we talk about a lot in schools, the quality of resilience, so these two intertwined really are such powerful tools. Because I think where people, where there is a problem, there is a solution. Where there is a challenge, there is an opportunity, and where there is darkness, there is sunshine ahead. We're here as part of the Nelson Mandela Youth Summit, and he's one of the most quoted men of all time. And one simple quote of his, which I quite enjoy, keep one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. They're very simple words, but what a powerful message, because it describes progress and commitment, determination and hope for the future. So for me personally, when I reflect back on my leadership development, I was probably influenced as a young person by sport. I started at this school 38 years ago. You've slightly exaggerated there, but 38's close to 40. 38 years ago at this school as a phys ed teacher. And before that, as a young man, and before that as a boy, one of the things I really enjoyed doing was to be involved in sport. And I think my participation in sport helped a lot. I thought I was just playing for fun, as you guys are doing now when you're involved in sport. But what you're doing when that's happening is that you're forming some really good traits that will take you onto leadership. And they're things around teamwork and commitment, supporting others, leaning on others, taking risks, and ultimately in that package of leadership. So we don't play because of that, but I think there's some of the things that come from the other involvements that we have in our lives. I was lucky enough to be given opportunities to lead in sport, and I'm sure this has translated to my career. I certainly didn't aspire to be a principal in the early stages of my career. I was very happy doing what I was doing, working with the kids, spent a lot of time out on the ovals and sporting fields nearby here. But as time went on, opportunities and doors opened, and I chose to step through those. It doesn't always come naturally. When I think back to myself as a child and my primary and secondary education, if there were times where speeches need to be delivered or oral presentations, I'd be the kid running to the back of the line, and by the time it got to my turn in 3 days' time or whatever it was, my anxieties were through the roof to the point where I could barely speak. So, bit by bit, developing confidence to take a chance, to trust yourself, and to overcome any fears, I think is incredibly important. When that is underpinned with an optimistic outlook, rather than thinking this will be a disaster, I think, this might work out okay. I think that's really important. So I encourage you young people that are tuning in today to do the same, to take a chance, to have confidence, knowing that yes, you'll make mistakes, but this is how we learn, this is how we develop. And you never know, you might surprise yourself where you end up. As far as the young people listening today, not a lot of young people consider themselves just yet as leaders. You're developing that, and some of you might think, oh, look, I'm not a leader, someone else can do that. But you can do this. You mightn't think you have what it takes, but you do have what it takes. I've seen such a shift in youth leadership over the duration of my career, and it's a really positive one, I believe. So in the earlier part of my career, I think our leaders were elected, and they were good people, they were good role models, and they carried out their tasks as directed by others more senior. As we move into a new era, though, of youth leadership, what I'm seeing is some of the following qualities. These people are now actively involved. They're far more active. They bring a range of their ideas and enthusiasm and attributes to the discussion. So factors and qualities like creativity and curiosity. Young people prepared to ask questions, but also prepared to listen. Young people with imagination. Young people with vision. People prepared to take risks that are calculated. A self-belief that they actually can make a difference and they can create change. And underpinning and underlying all of that is that framework of optimism and resilience. I think that whether you're younger or older, one of the key things that you can do is help to bring people together and to maximise the collective talents. So you look at different skills and qualities that people will bring to a situation, and to be able to tap into that, knowing that the sum of those parts is greater than the individual. As Mark said, I really hope you get involved today. It's not about sitting and listening for 2 hours. It's very much about interacting, about questioning, about challenging, about brainstorming, and thinking of what a better future might look like and how you can impact on that change. I'd like you, if you can at least take one thing, hopefully more, but just take one thing from this summit today and go off and make a difference with it and turn that thought into some action. Whether that be for yourself, for others, for those in Shepparton or all around the world, wherever you may be. Think big and remember those words. Keep one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. Thanks very much for the opportunity today.
Thank you so much. And I realise everyone is muted again, but they're all clapping like crazy. And if you can use those reaction buttons to show Ken, thank you, to show Ken your appreciation. Beautiful. Thanks for leading us in like this, because, and your reference to optimism over and over, it's so important. We're going to learn more about that as we travel. And I love this, take one thing, just take one thing away and then actually implement it in your life. That's fantastic. And if there was one gift Ken could give us, it would be optimism combined with resilience. Ken, you told us there's a solution to every problem. So the problems we're facing right now, there is a solution to every problem. I want people to be very, very aware of that. In the chat, while you were talking, Renee wrote, we are all leaders of self. Now, I love that. If you are have an Indian background, you will know the phrase inner Swaraj, inner governance, inner respect of yourself, and then how you bring that out to everyone else. Now, Mandela had that inner Swaraj, right? Thanks, Ken, for kicking us off. We're going to now invite, I think we do have Aaron on board now. Aaron Machano is, as I told you already, a remarkable young man. He's worked with Future Voices. He is the CEO of Leader of Tomorrow, and he's speaking to us from Bali on about Future Voices and his own experience of youth leadership. So Aaron, welcome to the stage.
All right, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me here?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, beautiful. I apologize for the inconvenience. Bali is one of those great places with great internet or no internet at all, nothing in between. So appreciate the opportunity. All right, great. So everyone can hear me. Okay, good. So yeah, thanks for the invitation there. And before I kick off, I just wanted to maybe start off by having some special thanks for the amount of amazing people that I've come to meet here. And we've had a lot of meetings. I think some of you leaders, maybe later I'll get a chance to answer some questions on how I got here. But I think the biggest part is always, hopefully you guys can take some notes, is being aware that there's a great African proverb that says, if you see a turtle, mango tree, just know that it never got there by itself. And in true fashion, for me, I'm here because of these amazing people that got this event started. And some of these people I've known for over 20 years now. So when I was 18, I started my journey and they've guided me. So I'd like to start by first welcoming the guests and the speakers and to young people's leading with optimism through this pandemic and beyond. And hopefully we'll share some insights on how you guys can become not just leaders through the pandemic, but use it as an opportunity to become better, stronger, and wiser. And so, special mention to these people that got me up on the mango tree, board members of Future Voices led by Dr. Polo. Special thanks to Victorian government, Department of Premier and Cabinet for the sponsoring this event. That's been amazing. The collaborating partners like March, Center for Optimism, Gandhi Experiment, Nelson Mandela Foundation in South Africa. Local businesses there, I think people like Printwork, Rob Priestley, Director of Goach Linen and Garment Services. I hear there's a lot of private business also supporting this event. And guys, if you're tuning in, it's really, really important. I'm an entrepreneur to understand that you can make very meaningful contributions through starting your own business. So maybe there'll be more of that about that. And some government bodies that I've heard are really exciting. I knocked on some of these doors when I was in Australia, like the US Consulate of Melbourne, South Africa High Commission, Department of Foreign Affairs, Australia Federal Government, Greater Shepparton City Council. I remember speaking in one of the buildings at the front steps there. I think the MP is also present. I can't see, there's 140 plus people here, but Wendy Lavelle, Northern Victoria MP there, Suzanne Sheed, I think, member of for Shepparton. And some of the colleges I actually visited. I don't know if there's any students there from La Trobe University. I did a speech there some time back. Shepparton Notre Dame College, JV Grammar School, Greater Shepparton Secondary College, and Shepparton Christian College as well. So I really wanted to start off by kicking off to talk about these kind of bodies, not just to give tribute and say thank you, but I think for you guys as young people, if you're connected and you're starting off your journey in the leadership aspect, with positive optimism is be very optimistic about connecting with organizations such as these, because they are there to help you. And too often we're too scared to step in, because we think that successful people won't help us, but in actual fact, they're the people that are really eager to hear from you and learn from you. So a very, very big thank you to all the other guys that have been supporting this thing. And so I guess introducing Future Voices, one of the biggest things I find, I was a refugee asylum seeker myself, is, building peace and harmony through trying to eradicate poverty and sustainability. I think some of these things really boil down to having a good education foundation, having awareness on humanitarian rights, and just also hopefully having a passion, you guys, for working with organizations like Future Voices, because without your voices, without having a sincere approach to having courageous leadership, as I call it, some of these barriers just are never going to go down. And we all know through current times that some things have come to the surface, but some people are still not speaking up. So love to give a big gratitude and I guess a welcome to introducing Future Voices work, because through these organizations, I too was one of those people that was molded, supported, and I really feel like through education is one of the biggest contributors to helping a person make an impact in a community. So I wanted to introduce the Future Voices Foundation with that. And then lastly, the Nelson Mandela mission or vision in Australia it's a youth leadership summit. I think bringing people together like this is not easy online, but again, someone has to do it. And I feel like if you're working with organizations like the Nelson Mandela mission, particularly this year, you're not only trying to connect with you guys in Australia, you can see I'm in Bali, there's a few people all over the world. This is one of the best foundations to be connected to, because you have an opportunity now, not just to meet people locally, but you can then connect with other people such as myself and others around the world, where you can network with young people and actually start to share not just ideas, but I hope skills over time, because these are the things that are going to move us forward. So very, very excited about that. So I think just to wrap up, I didn't want to talk too much about myself and my business. I feel I'm more of a product of places like Nelson Mandela Mission and Future Voices. But I feel like just a short story, when I worked with Rashidi, he would tell you, he was one of the few people that actually lent me a bit of money to go register my business called Leaders of Tomorrow, because I had a passion to work with refugee youth and asylum seekers who were stuck in in prison. And I found that they couldn't get jobs because of not just the barriers of language and literacy, but they had criminal records. So when I went and worked with them, the only alternative they had was to actually create their own careers. And that got me started into helping them with enterprise. So I'd like to finish by saying that, my interest here is to hopefully be an example to share that you guys can do something great, but it does take working together. And this is really one of the biggest pushes I've seen around the world, is any youth organization, any leadership organization, is the ability to share ideas, share skills, and don't try and reinvent the wheel, because, together we can complete each other and we don't have to compete. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I hope I've said enough, and I can't thank you guys enough for inviting me here, and thank you to the people that made this happen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. Again, can we see all those lovely reactions there? People are cheering even though they can't hear you. Look, Aaron has spoken, it's about teamwork, isn't it? I love that quote. If you see a turtle in a mango tree, you know that it did not get there by itself. And that goes for the Mandelas of this world, doesn't it? The Gandhis, the Mother Teresas, none of them got there on their own. It's all about teamwork, and that's what you're telling us. But that's incredible what you're doing for those young people who need that help. And it's in the chat here. Jada Welsh has said, Aaron brought up a really good point. Those who are in leadership as well as helping positions are here to help you. They want to help you. So, be prepared to ask for that help. Thanks, Aaron. That was really well. And we'll hear more from Aaron and Ken as we go through. Right now, we have a very special video to share with you. And this is from His Excellency, Mr. Martinez van Schalkwijk, the High Commissioner for Republic of South Africa in Australia.
I'm optimistic about the future because I have an unshakable belief in human ingenuity, the ability to be innovative, to be creative. Good day. I want to commend Mr. Rashidi Sumaili for keeping President Nelson Mandela's name and legacy alive. And so much better if that investment is in the lives of the younger generation. I'm optimistic about the future because I have an unshakable belief in human ingenuity, the ability to be innovative, to be creative. We are at a very difficult place at the moment, but it is not the first time that as the human race, we are where we are now. After the flu pandemic in the 1918s, we were despondent, but the human race responded by being creative, innovative, accepting the challenges. And the result was the roaring 20s, economies growing, new innovations. We have the same challenge now. The challenge for the younger generation is to provide leadership, to accept the responsibility to be leaders, be it in the economy, politics, education, community work. There are challenges all over. One of the best definitions that I have ever heard of leadership is that leadership is the ability to be on your way somewhere, to know where that somewhere is, but also have the ability to convince people to join you on that journey. When I was a young person, our country, South Africa, was still divided. We had a policy of apartheid. Black people and white people were divided, separate residential areas, separate schools, almost no contact. And in the 1980s, when I was a student, I accepted the responsibility to challenge this conventional wisdom. And I led a number of delegations made up by white students to meet with the black students, not only in South Africa, but also with the liberation movements, which at that stage were banned from the country. And I have no doubt that in a small way, that contributed to a better understanding in our country. I also had the privilege in serving in our first democratic parliament from 1994. Well, I was there for 25 years, but for the first 5 years, I served there with Mr. Nelson Mandela as our first democratic president, the father of our nation. And yes, there are many lessons that one learned from him. But for me, one of the most important lessons is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of your interlocutor, of your opponent, and to understand why that person takes that position. And I have no doubt that over the decades, that is what provided the opportunities in our country to find solutions. Because we had a leader like President Mandela, who had that rare ability to not only think about his own agenda, what he wanted to achieve, his objectives, his organization's objectives, but also understanding what actually was behind what his opponents and interlocutors wanted. And that is a rare ability. And that, I feel, is sometimes what we miss in the world now. Leaders with that ability to understand his or her interlocutor and at the same time have the ability to find solutions. All of the best with your initiative, and I wish you every success. Thank you.
I've been working.
Yes, an incredible speech. And I know Rashidi will send back all of our thanks to the High Commissioner for that. There's so much in that very short speech, and that speech can be found with many others at the Centre for Optimism website, and you can listen to it again because there's so much in there. And the learnings from Mandela, this idea of understanding your enemy's perspective. And he said that's a very rare quality. Few people actually do that. And I think it's something we need to, we need to all start thinking about this and Mandela's ability to do that. And somebody's written, a couple of people written in the chat about, so from Rod Wade, Madiba's capacity for forgiveness was remarkable and necessary to move South Africa forward. So again, if Mandela, who was referred to as Madiba, can do that, well, we can do that too. Okay, this is wonderful, wonderful beginnings. I would now like to invite a wonderful speaker, a highly infectious, optimistic speaker, Victor Purton, who is the Chief Optimist Officer of the Centre for Optimism. And I would like to invite him to speak. He's going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll go to our first breakout group, but very succinctly. Victor has served as a senior advisor in the Australian G20 presidency. He played a vital engagement role in the Brisbane G20 Leaders Summit. He's a former commissioner to the Americas in building investment, trade, global supply chains, supporter networks. 18 years as a parliamentarian in Victoria. Victor, you have so much lived experience and knowledge to share with us. So please welcome.
Thanks very much. It's such a joy to be here. Now, those of you who've been to the last 2 Nelson Mandela events know that I normally take an hour to do this and we're all together. But in the world of COVID and the world of Zoom, we're going to try and do this in 10 minutes. So what is the world looking for? The world is looking for realistic and infectiously optimistic leaders. Now, where do we look for them? It's realistic and infectiously optimistic leaders just like you. In this world of pessimism and a fog of pessimism, you are going to be a beacon. And you can see that my symbolism is all around a lighthouse on the hill. That's you. Now, only 3 things I want you to remember from my presentation. The first one is the leader is the person I see in my mirror. Right? I want you all to shout it out. I know you're on mute, but shout it out so someone at the back of the house can hear it. The leader is the person I see in my mirror. Go on, Akil, shout it out. The leader is the person I see in my mirror. And for those of you who use red lipstick, write that on your mirror today. Those of you who don't wear red lipstick, borrow it from one of the women in your household and write that on your mirror so it's there tomorrow. The second thing which you're doing today is surround yourself with optimists. One of Australia's richest men said, "I will never have a pessimist around my table, Victor. If I want a pessimist, I'll hire them from a law firm or an accounting firm by the hour. But I want people around me who lift me." So when you're having coffee, when you're playing games, when you're Zooming, when you're on social media, make sure it's with the optimists like today. And then this question, which is the fundamental question of today, and I know some of you have already gone out and asked mum and dad and others about this: what makes you optimistic? Now, what is optimism? This is our best definition. It comes from Harvard, Stanford, the American military, Oxford. This is the one they use. Optimism is an expectation that good things will happen, that things will work out in the end. And some people add to that, if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. And one of my favorite saints, a woman called Julian of Norwich, funny name for a woman, but they took men's names in those days. She lived in a little cell in the 13th century in the middle of the Black Plague, during the middle of persecutions. And she said, "All shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well." It's lasted 700 years. So why should you ask yourself, and why should you ask other people, what makes you optimistic? And this lady, Megumi Miki, or Miki Megumi, I should say, sometimes is an Australian Japanese author. And this is what she said when I asked her that question. Even being asked the question, what makes you optimistic, caused me to look for the bright side, which is very uplifting. When you couple optimism with the courage to confront reality, it is a powerful force for positive change. So I'd like to do a little poll. So this little poll, I think most of you should be able to see it on the screen now. What makes you optimistic? And you can fill in all 6 of them if you like. Life experience, mindset, faith, family and friends, gratitude, young people. So you should be able to use that now. Just click on one of the options there. If you can't see it, tell me. But let's start filling it in. And what are we getting? As in our global research, what we've found is life experience is a big one. There is a theory that says that you don't actually hit peak optimism till you're in your 60s. Mindset, these things are a fundamental choice. Faith, crucially important. Family and friends, I'm just wondering why no one is participating in the poll. Can someone just tell me if you can see the poll?
No, there was just a little hiccup with the poll in that everyone else could see it, but Victor couldn't see it running. So we'll jump a little further forward in the speech.
And let's end the poll.
Mindset's the biggest one.
And excellent. It's just doing something funny at my end. So Margaret, what can you see as the top answers?
The top answer there is mindset, but very close to that is family and friends and life experience.
Fantastic. So why should you be optimistic? I'm just going to bring up another poll and you'll be able to see that as well. And you can flick on this while I'm talking. Boston University, Harvard, the American military did a huge study last year, 200,000 people over 50 years. The most crucial component in living to a healthy old age, and many of you are just 12, 13, 14 now, is optimism. It's not geography, it's not wealth, it's nothing else. It's optimism. The American College of Cardiology, the Mount Sinai Medical System have shown that if you're optimistic, you have a much lower risk of heart disease. The Vienna Medical School 3 weeks ago did a huge report. The optimist sleeps better because they are able to put the normal anxieties of life. And the last one, the University of Michigan has found you have a much happier marriage or partnership. So those of you who are single, when you go on that next date with that possible beau, have a think about asking that question. What makes you optimistic? And throw it in. And those of you who are married or with a partner, have a think about the ways in which you can help them to be more optimistic too. Then the third thing, in the world of work. In the world of work, optimism is crucial. So the head of McKinsey said to me, Victor, you can talk about 50, 60, 70 qualities of the leader. The most important quality is infectious leadership. And it's not the big bloke or the strong woman standing at the front of the stage doing the rah-rah speech. It's the person who can unlock the optimism from the team. My friend Robert Masters is on this call, and he's one of the experts in strategy. And we did a study of 400 strategy experts around the world. The key to a good strategy is optimism, right? The key to innovation is optimism. You all hear that you have to be innovative, and all you teachers know that you're told you have to be innovative. But you can't be innovative unless you're optimistic, unless you can accept failure and move on. And then resilience too. You know, people talk about being resilient, but how can you be resilient if you don't see a better tomorrow? And Jane Burns who is the head of who was the head of the Young and Well Foundation, or the CRC. She says, look, you can talk about resilience, you can talk about tenacity, but when the chips are down, the thing that is going to pull you through is optimism. Now, I've got a couple of minutes left because we're running a bit behind time and I want to catch up so our diplomats can speak. So I've got two friends online here, Jenny Boymel and Noireen, and we are building a course called The Habits of an Optimist. And we've got 14 habits, but I'd like you just to quickly look at these habits. Now, I can't see, I'm going to go onto gallery view now, and I'd really love you all to be on video. The first habit of an optimist is smile like an optimist. Can we all try that? Can everyone smile? Pan, smile, deeper's in India. It's early in the morning. Cecilia, smile at us. Miranda, smile at us. It's easy to forget, but you get up in the morning, I don't want to go to school, or mum's just woken me up, or dad's woken me up. Try and remember to smile, smile at strangers, smile on video. It is the key to happiness. It's the key to optimism. Then laugh like an optimist. Now, I'm not good at teenage humor. I still tell old-fashioned jokes and get into trouble. So let's just practice. Everyone, just imagine you've been told to laugh and just laugh to me. Come on, everyone laugh. Moira, you're laughing beautifully. Mahek, you're laughing. Adele, you're in a mask. See if you can laugh through that mask. Julian is laughing. Then the next thing I'd like to do, the next hint I want to give you is to use infectiously optimistic greetings. Now, my children will not go to the supermarket with me anymore because I tell this to the supermarket people. What happens when you ask an Aussie, how are you? Or a Kiwi or a Frenchman or a Chinese guy? What do they say? Oh, they say not bad or not too bad. What a waste of a question and what a waste of an answer. Today and tomorrow, instead of saying, how are you to someone, try this. What's the best thing happening for you? Whatever comes natural to you, but it will change the conversation. And then secondly, if someone says to you, Mahek, how are you? What you're going to do is theatrically pause. And you're going to say, thank you for asking. God, I went to an interesting summit today, or look, I did some really interesting work. Cecilia, have a think about this. This is, if someone says, how are you? Don't say good, terrific. Say something interesting that starts a conversation. And then because I'm running out of time, the other 4 habits I'd like to press on you are share stories of optimism and hope. Don't rely on the newspapers to spread the news. You spread the news. Meditate or pray. There's evidence that meditation increases the thickness of the frontal portion of the brain, increasing your happiness and optimism. So even if you meditate once a week or twice a week or pray, you will thicken the frontal portion of the brain and become stronger. Practice gratitude. You've probably all heard this before, but remember to say thank you. And then that last question, ask what makes you optimistic. Now, what I'd like to do now is we're going to break up into groups. We're going to break up into groups of 6. And what I'd like you to do for about 1 minute each, so you'll be 6 to 7 in every room. Everyone who's not on video, can you get yourself onto video? Everyone who's on mute, get yourself onto mute. And we will spend 6 minutes in the breakout with each one of you sharing what makes you optimistic. And then you can share it in the chat box too.
So we broke out into breakout groups for 6 minutes, and then we came back together.
Everyone, Grace and Co tell me they had a good time in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, we had a wonderful time. We were getting really great ideas on what makes you optimistic. I wonder if we've got time just for one very quick comment or one question of Victor. Would anybody like to be that person? Just one question or comment.
Victor.
Yes, thank you. Go.
Just to make it easy for young and old, I was trying to say to the group that I was in, I strongly believe that optimism is a matter of choice. We choose to be optimistic. And the best example is the half full glass or the half empty glass. It's our choice to be the way we want to be.
Now, children and adults, Topo has the unique experience of having been a national rugby player for Argentina, a national rugby player for Australia, and when you Google him, you'll find he actually played for 3 different countries. But anyway, look, I hope you enjoyed that exercise. We did it quite quickly, but if ever any of you want to do it more slowly at school or the like, we can do it as a slow exercise. And can I hand pass back to Mark Hepworth?
Thank you so much, Victor. That was really inspiring. And you yourself are just infectious. The optimism is infectious. Thank you so much. If you have questions for Victor, please just pop them in the chat, and if he gets a chance, he will try to reply to you directly through the chat if he can. And also for Ken Murray and for Aaron as well, keep feeding through the chat. Can I please invite Fazana Alizada, who's a student at Greater Shepparton Secondary College, just to say a nice thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Purton. We appreciate and thank you for giving your time to organize this conference and for being here to talk to us. I thought that you said about the leader is in the person I see in my mirror was very relevant to young people and had a powerful meaning. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. And I hope you're going to put lipstick on your mirror, Fazana, saying the leader is the person in my mirror. Look at it every morning. Back to you, Margaret.
Oh, brilliant. Just thank you, Fazana. That's beautiful. We are now going to hear from 2 speakers. Both of them are speaking on building cross-cultural relationships. They are speaking on diplomacy and global affairs. So we're very, very privileged actually today to have Michael Klein, the USA Consul General, and Andrew Cumpston, the Director of the Victoria State Office Department of Foreign Affairs, with us. They'll both speak for 7 minutes each, and then we'll go into a breakout room again, reflecting on what they are talking about and hopefully having time to ask them some further questions. So Michael Klein has broad experience as a senior foreign service officer with nearly 20 years in the US Department of State. Before his arrival in Melbourne, Michael served in Laos, in South Korea, Kosovo, Vietnam, and he was among the first to work in the US Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City. So a wealth of lived experience. Michael, thanks. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful, warm introduction. Victor, thank you for the invitation. Thanks to everybody for coming today. Really, really excited to see the screen full of folks who are interested in this important topic of optimism and the future. But I've got to point out, as you all know, it's September 2020. Our old normal lives are upside down, back to front. Nothing is as it was even in January. And at this point, I would normally spend some time introducing what I'm going to talk about, maybe reflect on that really interesting exercise that we just had in the breakout room. But because today everything is upside down, back to front, I'm just going to jump straight in. My name is Mike Klein, U.S. Consul General in Melbourne, and I'm going to present to you in upside down, backwards, reverse order, the 5 reasons why I think young people like yourselves are going to save us in the post-COVID world. And number 5, the 5th reason, is that I think digital natives, like all of you, are going to be able to innovate and connect all of us out of this. Just try thinking right now of what it was like 102 years ago. Here in Australia, like in the US and other parts of the world, there is a huge, ferocious pandemic going on. It wasn't COVID, it was the Spanish flu. And if you were able to transport yourself back at that time, you would recognize as familiar a lot of the response to it. People were told to isolate. People were told to quarantine themselves. People were wearing masks. And most of all, people were hoping that a cure would come about. And so at that time, you would recognize some things, but something now is really different. And at that time, you were truly isolated. You couldn't attend a forum like this. You couldn't meet up virtually with your friends or anything like that. But now, ordinary citizens and world leaders alike are meeting via Zoom, via Teams, via WebEx. We're far apart, but it's technology that's enabling us to stay connected and get things done in new sorts of ways. And this embrace of technology has been a steep learning curve for a lot of folks of my generation. But for all of you who grew up with this technology, you've taken it to it in stride, and you're going to work out even better ways to innovate with the technology to get us moving forward. And when it comes to diplomacy, I'm not saying we'll never have face-to-face summits again, but because now we're doing these things in Zoom, we're realizing that there's a lot more that can be done with access. The connections are more accessible. And I think it's you, Gen Z and others, who are going to take this approach and run with it, and hopefully bring all countries and the broader international community closer together. Number 4 reason that you all are going to bring us forward in the post-COVID world is that young people are bridge builders. The response to the COVID and the search for a vaccine has shown that it really does take a village. No one community, no one state, no one country can do this alone. And so as countries are working together on a global basis to beat this virus. In the US, we've invested in something we're calling Operation Warp Speed. And that's putting about $10 billion into trying to find the next try to find the vaccine that's going to get us through COVID. And we're spending about $1 billion of that right here in Melbourne. And a test for a vaccine trial. We're optimistic that we're going to see something good out of that. And these trials wouldn't be happening in places like Melbourne unless you had these close connections. And these close connections are being made by young people, and they're connecting online. So with your generation being the most educated, most ethnically and racially diverse, most accepting of societal change, I think you're going to embrace these connections as a feature of your generation. And you're just as connected speaking to somebody at San Francisco or Juba as you are in Shepparton or Melbourne. Reason number 3, the generosity of spirit. Now, we've all seen the terrible effect of COVID, COVID's having on our elders. And as a community, Victorians have made huge changes to daily life, to work, to families, to try to keep our elders as safe as possible. And I've been so impressed throughout this year of the examples of young people stepping up to help more vulnerable populations. And we saw that particularly during the public housing lockdowns, where we saw young people from African Australian communities, from Sikh communities, from Muslim communities, acting as a real lifeline to communities. And that's a testament to the generosity of spirit that I see in young people. It's a sad reality. We're not going to be able to bounce quickly out of the public health effects or the economic effects of the pandemic. But seeing that spirit of generosity really makes me confident and optimistic that we're going to recover pretty quickly and more quickly than we think. Number 2, reason young people are going to lead us out of the COVID pandemic into a better, newer world is that all of you are going to serve as fake news filters. Really important. The reliability of information is critical to addressing the pandemic, all sorts of global issues. And we're getting a lot of this information online. And as your generation being digital natives, I have a lot of confidence in your ability to do the critical thinking, to sift out what's good information from bad information, and share the real and the important news, and flag what's fake news out there, and flag the disinformation, and be a leader for those of you who might not be as savvy as you are online, and use your critical eye to sort out what's right from wrong. And finally, I think the number 1 reason is that the road to recovery is going to be built by Generation Z, by young people, is that the road to recovery is going to be long. It will be long. I think we're going to snap out of it quickly, but we're going to feel the effects for a long time. And I think that young people are the engine of our society's ideas for innovation and creativity. And you're going to come up with something bigger and better. And I think it's going to be, it could be tech, it could be in other areas, but I'm a lot of optimistic that your generation is going to find that road ahead. And I encourage all of you to be part of that conversation. Engage with your lawmakers, engage with your representatives. They need to hear your ideas. And if you're having trouble being heard, find an amplifier, find a community leader, a journalist, a local counselor, talk to them. We need your voices. We need your creativity. And as Victor will tell you, we need your optimism to get the world back on track. I know you all could do it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Wow, again, Michael, thank you. What beautifully succinct message there, and very practical, very, very practical ideas for young people to, you know, to forge ahead and to really know and understand we all have a role to play. So we're not just pinning the burden of the future on young people. That is not what Michael was saying, because every single one of us, you know, plays a role. We all are our own future, but we're all in this, combine this with this concept of teamwork. But that is amazing what you've just shared with us. We will move to our next speaker, and then, as I said, we'll move to breakout rooms and come back, and you'll be able to ask Michael and Andrew some questions, more questions. So, Andrew Pumpston is a senior career officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Previously, Andrew has been Australia's Deputy Head of Mission in Wellington in New Zealand. And in Canberra, Andrew has held a range of positions, including the Assistant Secretary, Banks and Funds Branch, and was a board member of the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria. He will be speaking to us about the problematic power dynamics in diplomacy and business areas. So can we welcome Andrew? Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much for that kind welcome, and please stop me if you can't hear me. And firstly, can I start by associating myself with that beautiful welcome to country, and also acknowledge what fantastic speakers have been thus far. I've actually been taking notes, and I've changed what I was going to say because I've been inspired by the optimism. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is to talk about the theme I was asked to talk about, which is problematic power dynamics. A very valid question. But in diplomacy, we often don't describe things as problematic because we tend to be more optimistic and express things as challenges or obstacles to be overcome. And secondly, in many ways, problematic is often a word, the next word is used about the way another person is talking. And what may be problematic to you or I, or in a contemporary society, may not be problematic to another group of people in another country. You can't choose another country's government, their values, their cultural history, and they might have very different views than you on whether it be free speech, gender, human rights, economic freedom, all sorts of values that go up to making a country. They change over time, and countries evolve in different ways. And part of the art of diplomacy and many other professions is staying true to your values, while also finding common grounds with people who are different to you. And when you approach it in good faith, you can overcome so many different cultural obstacles. And I don't think it's at all a coincidence that the South African High Commissioner to Australia, which is a very senior role in the South African system, that he, in his youth, he led groups of people from very different backgrounds, and apartheid deliberately split people apart. And he led groups of people together to talk to each other and start a dialogue. And I'm sure he learned a lot of his interpersonal skills, but also that served him well as a diplomat today. But he also clearly had an attitude of bringing people together and focusing on the commonalities and not the differences. So it's an interesting little revealed preference about how people get to where they are later in life through taking an open-minded attitude. I was going to very briefly talk a bit about COVID and Australian Foreign Affairs response, then also a bit about strategic environments, and thirdly, a little bit about Africa, which I was asked to talk to as well. But mainly, the overwhelming message I'd like people to hear is something I'm going to get to halfway through, which is to all the young people out there, think about diplomacy and think about making a contribution. Firstly, there is no doubt that COVID is a massive shock to our system, whether it be through economic, health, people-to-people linkages. It is frequently described by decision makers as the largest shock of our lifetime, which I think is a very fair way to look at it. And it does require an unprecedented response. It's been a huge seismic shift in the way that my department, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, has started to look around the world. For the starters, one of the most important things to Australians, to Australian politicians, my boss, and to everyone, is Australians overseas. And there's been over 350,000 Australians who have needed to come home. There are still more who want to come home, and you might have seen announcements about that recently. But that's many people have been working around the clock, working huge hours to help facilitate that, and it's not easy. There's been, as people know, there's a huge amount of debate about what's the appropriate level of border movement, and underneath that, there's a lot of officials, there's a lot of real people being affected by very large decisions. So it remains it remains a huge effort and something that we dedicate a huge amount of time to. Sort of the diplomatic side of diplomacy is still something that's, in anything, becoming more important as time goes by. As the Prime Minister has pointed out, now that we can't travel as much, the role of diplomats being the eyes and ears to countries overseas becomes even more important. It's to take a sort of relatively famous example, that the Australian diplomats in Geneva were very successful in gathering international support, which eventually had 150 votes in favour of it for a view into COVID-19 and the responses and how we can learn lessons to apply to future crises. But that all started as a diplomatic initiative, and the review is continuing, is ongoing at the moment. Of course, there's been a huge amount of work in getting the necessary health equipment from overseas. It remains a very high priority. I could give you endless statistics about the amount of health in a highly contested international environment, the amount of healthcare supplies that have come into Australia to prepare Australia adequately for the COVID pandemic. In many of those supplies are still on standby should the pandemic worsen. But at the moment, optimistically, things have actually gone very well. So the ventilators and things like that are still things in emergency surge capacity. And also a key thing, if the Secretary of the Department was here, I heard her talk about this 2 days ago. One key thing about one of the reasons we've been able to do this so well, and it's something that is such a high priority for our department, is diversity. And for now, for instance, 40% of our ambassadors are women. My last High Commissioner was a very senior Australian businesswoman. But it's not just a gender issue. It is, we have Muslim ambassadors, we have Indigenous Australian ambassadors. Australia's diplomatic corps is as diverse as Australia, and we're encouraging more and more of that diversity, because we feel reflecting Australia's diversity makes for good diplomacy. So if I can make a little pitch, I know it's not easy to get in the DFAT grad program, but please consider applying for it, because we want more bright young people like you. If I just very briefly talk about the strategic environment, we all know it's getting more contested, and yes, power dynamics can be problematic. That is something we'll have to continue to engage with. And we still work with our friends, with our allies, but also countries we have common ground with that we don't necessarily share all the views with, all our views with. We have been lucky. We lived in a benign strategic environment with the United States that has predominantly been set by the United States, which was another liberal democracy, which, although we're not identical, we share many values with. That will not necessarily always be the case. The world is becoming more contested, and we can't always accept that a certain view will be predominant, but it's something we work very closely with all our colleagues in building. And it's something I was asked to talk about Africa that is very much very real and alive in Africa. The contest of values and how African nations manage is something that remains a live issue as it always has been. And COVID has very much affected Africa like it has affected the rest of the world. It's past 1 million cases. The economic impact is different in different countries. Some countries deal with a direct impact like South Africa. Other countries have a secondary impact deal with the secondary impact of COVID. And how we manage that is something that I think we get better at every year. The world learns more and more lessons. And there's a question of what Australia can do in all these circumstances. And we, of course, do not have the enormous economic power of the United States, but we don't have quite the $10 billion program, but we have, that Michael mentioned, but we have invested, for instance, $80 million already to pre-buy COVID vaccines for developing countries so that they too can vaccinate their population. And it's not just something that developed countries benefit from. So there's little things that Australia can do to make to help the global community. Well, important things. And finally, I would make a very important point about Africa. There is a lot of diplomacy that goes on, but one of the strongest diplomatic assets we have in dealing with Africa is that there are 400,000 people in Australia of African descent. And those diaspora, they're so important in building linkages back to Africa and building linkages between Australia and the African continent. So I would encourage people to consider themselves leaders in that area, to think about ways that the two countries can come close together, because it is something that we have so much in common, and we need to, Africa in a few short years will be 1/3 of the global population, and it remains incredibly important in so many ways to all of us. Now, the final thing I'll say is I wanted to just end on a note of optimism. The world is increasingly interconnected, whether we like it or not. Things like the shipping container have fundamentally changed the world economy, international travel, or through temporarily in abeyance. So much of what we do now is our world grows ever closer than it was in our previous generations. Yes, we are dealing with a shock, but it's not insurmountable. If you look at previous generations, they dealt with equally bad shocks, and they recovered it, and they built back stronger. These things can be overcome. And one of the reasons COVID is such a shock to us is because our healthcare is infinitely better than our ancestors had it. And now, dealing with the challenge, we've responded robustly. But if you look at the course of human history, human beings are resilient. We've dealt with things like this before, and we've overcome it, and we've learnt lessons, and we've built stronger societies after it. So nothing is insurmountable. The course of history, human beings live better, they live longer, healthier lives in general, and there's plenty of reasons for optimism. And thank you so much for talking today.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Andrew. That's really inspiring. And I love that, comment towards the end, nothing is insurmountable. And we keep hearing that, but it's been really fascinating listening, to more about what's happening with COVID around the world, Australia's response to this. Now, Michael spoke about, this need for a generosity of spirit. And here you are saying, that Australia is not just interested in helping ourselves, we're interested in helping others in this situation. That right there is a national generosity of spirit. So that's wonderful. There's amazing stuff happening in the chat room, being inspired by what both, you and Michael have talked about. And Bruce saying, there is more common ground between adversaries than we realize. And Renee is saying adversity presents opportunity. And so you're really helping people think more broadly about relationships and how we grapple with problematic issues, as you pointed out. Right now, we're going to go into our breakout groups again, small breakout groups, only 5 minutes, not long. And we want you to reflect on what Michael and Andrew have been talking about, what has come up for you in these two speeches. We could listen to these two men for hours, but what has come up for you? And specifically, is there a question you would like to bring back to either one of them at the end of the breakout group? So Victor, let's just go straight.
And so we went back into the breakout groups, which everyone said was a marvellous experience of young and old sharing their ideas.
Deepa's here with us from South India. Good to see you, Deepa. It must be early in the morning.
Oh, it was. I had 3 alarms at least to wake up on time. I woke up my sister and mother too.
Excellent, excellent. So I've got a great audience from all around the world, Michael.
It's fantastic.
But from
Fantastic.
Denver to South India and beyond.
Hey, Victor, something you mentioned also in the list this morning of things that we could do to make a difference. You mentioned meditation.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've just started doing since isolation began in March. I've never done it before. And just 3 or 5 minutes every day doing it really does make a difference. I've been so impressed with how a simple thing like that can also kind of change your outlook and just kind of set your frame of mind for the rest of the day. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the science says it actually thickens the frontal portion of the brain. MRIs have shown it. Now, Mark, where are you? Mark Hepworth.
I need to unmute. I think, are we all back?
Yep, everyone's back.
Can I ask a question to
yes, please.
His Excellency Consul General Michael Klein? My name is Will Abdo, CEO of WebTrade Marketing. I have a question for you with regarding to how do we act as filters for fake news?
Good question.
I think that speaking of young people who grew up in the digital age, I think are much more savvy than older generations. It's my belief, based on nothing but my own hunch, that digital natives are among the most savvy of us in being able to sift what's fake news from real news. And because as digital natives, they're comfortable with this environment, it's their landscape. And for them to be able to serve as not necessarily gatekeepers, but flag throwers of what's out there that doesn't look right, flag it. Don't just necessarily ignore it if it's inflammatory, flag it and tell Twitter, tell Facebook, tell Google, whoever's spreading it that, hey, this is wrong. And if enough people are able to do that, then I think that can make a difference.
I have a question to both speakers. I would request the two speakers to comment on what we may have to do post-COVID, given the social and economic inequalities and access to resources and distribution of those resources, which is a global problem.
Well, my background is development economics, so it remains, it was a huge issue before COVID, and in many ways COVID has exacerbated it. So it's not a 50-word answer, but I think what we can't do is descend in protectionism and go for easy extreme answers in times of vulnerability. Countries rarely become rich or rarely are able to feed, clothe, give appropriate healthcare and education by shutting off their borders, by being virtual islands. That is not the path to peace and prosperity. Neither is completely laissez-faire trade without thought to boundaries, to customs, to what is sustainable for countries, and of course global warming will remains a huge challenge. But retreat into protectionism, isolationism will be exactly the worst thing that countries can do.
Thanks, Andrew. Michael, did you want to add?
Just add to that, I think in the globalized world, problems anywhere can quickly become problems everywhere. So it's important to address issues around the world as they arise. And the United States is committed to that. We've had the largest development program in the world for decades, and it's all because of that recognition.
Mm. Thank you. I think we will have to keep moving. We have two more wonderful speakers. I know Will in our group, who asked that question about the fake news, had some, really good ideas himself on, us taking the responsibility to check the source and to be, to rely on credible sources. I think that's a really good answer, Will. But thanks to both of you. I'd like to ask Hussein Samale to thank both our speakers.
Look, on behalf of everybody on Zoom, we would like to thank you, Michael and Andrew, for giving up your time to come to talk to us. More importantly, listen to you great leaders speak to us, and to see the belief and the trust you have in us as young people to change the world for the better gives me great strength and motivation to, move forward and take on a responsibility for that. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That was lovely, Hussein. Thank you. We did schedule in a time for a bit of a break, and of course, as always, we're running way behind time. If you feel you do need to stop for a minute, stand up and stretch, because stretching and moving actually brings clarity to our brains. You can just turn off your video for a while and do that, but I'd invite you to keep listening. All right, so, and again, if you need to go and get that glass of water, please do that. These are the little things in our lives that actually do help keep us vibrant, tiny little things, that strategies we can use. So I would really like to welcome our next speaker. Dr. Amanda Capels is the lead scientist in Victoria, and she's speaking on science and innovation needs young leaders like you. So Amanda is a catalyst who's responsible for working across the Victorian government to identify opportunities for economic outcomes by building relationships between business, the research sector, and government. Many thanks, Amanda, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Marg, for that kind introduction, and great to be with everyone here today. And it would have been great to be up with you in Shepparton. Most recently, I've been part of the regional partnership in the Goulburn region. So I'm very familiar with Shepparton and the whole of, in fact, regional Victoria. So as Marg has said, and I guess, really through and continuing the conversation that both Michael and Andrew have started, and going to the point around nothing is insurmountable, because if I've got one message, it is that I'm totally convinced that the big challenges that we face can be overcome, and that they'll be overcome by a wide variety of people, and that the solutions will come from areas that we don't anticipate. And in fact, that really is often the source of innovation, those interfaces between different disciplines, between different perspectives, between just different talent coming together and focusing on particular challenges, which, when as individuals we look at them and we think, well, we can't do that, but actually when you come together, chunk down that problem and assemble the team around you, then big things can really happen. And science and technology totally will underpin and has underpinned all the developments. If you look at from the Industrial Revolution to vaccination, we are truly standing on the shoulders of giants, as Isaac Newton said. Let me give you one really topical example and perhaps give you a different perspective on one of humankind's greatest achievements in the last 50 years. And of course, that is when NASA delivered on JFK's ambition to land man on the moon. So this was a great aspirational target, and the team that was tasked to undertake that work, could you imagine being on that team and being given this mission? And the Navy team, which was the primary driver of delivering that solution, that started tackling the problem by thinking about, well, how do we get the man to the moon? And then they quickly realized that they were actually asking the wrong question, because the question that they really needed to answer is, how do we get man or woman back from the moon? Because there was, JFK wouldn't really have been able to deliver on his vision if we weren't able to actually get the astronauts back. So the reason why I tell that story is because you often think that the objective that you're going after is one thing, and it's always worth thinking about, is that actually, what do I do when I get there? And is that the ultimate destination? Do I need to, is it actually something else that I'm trying to do? And using that kind of approach and then working back from, well, we get them back into the sea, what needs to happen before that and what needs to happen before that. And that you actually find planning backwards is actually a better way of trying to, or, you know, of achieving your ambition, because it makes you think of the different steps and it chunks it down into manageable steps that you actually oftentimes find that it just simplifies the task immensely. So, so whilst, you know, a lot of people give advice about you've got to have this grand plan and you've got to work out exactly what you want to do at the age of 16, I don't believe that. I never had that, but I always did have a plan around something that I really wanted to achieve. And so I think that that would be my message, is think about what really makes you passionate. Think about what the destination is, and test that internally with yourself, test it with your family, and then work out how you're going to get there by reverse engineering. So what I did, so I had no real premeditation around this, and I'm talking to those of you around this Zoom table who are doing VCE, or maybe you're not doing VCE this year, but you're building up to that and thinking about your future. Because I think one thing that this pandemic has brought to the forefront is a greater uncertainty about what careers might be available and the pathways to getting there. And so what I did, if this is helpful in terms of thinking about some of the different options that you might not otherwise have considered, I did my VCE, and I was pretty clear that I wanted to do a science degree. And so that piece wasn't difficult for me, but the question in my mind was, do I go immediately from high school into university? And it really wasn't until I finished exams that I thought, okay, well, I'll put in my application, and if I get in, that's terrific. But I set myself a target of during the summer holidays to identify a job that I could do for a year before going to university. So in effect, I was planning a gap year, but I set myself a target, conditions on what I would accept as a job. It needed to be something that was meaningful and that would be supportive of my career direction. And I was, as it turned out, was fortunate enough to get a position as a lab assistant in a quality control laboratory, and that really it didn't quite ignite, but it really accelerated my passion for science. And so my message to those of you who are thinking about these things is do think of the options that are available to you. Have a bit of a plan. It doesn't need to be an ironclad plan, but just, you know, go out there, and set conditions on yourself so that you know that what you're, you know, what you're willing to accept, and just, you know, just do it. And you'll be surprised at the opportunities that emerge as a consequence of you taking active ownership of your career pathway and actually forging your own career, like many of us around the table today have done. So that's how my young leadership set me up for my career. I was always looking for, well, what will be the next thing? And then identifying amongst my universe where the opportunities were and who was there, who could help me get to that position, because we all get into different roles and different responsibilities as a consequence of bringing others along with us, as well as being brought along by others within our environment who see the value that we are delivering. So what are the issues that young people need to address? Well, we hear a lot about energy and climate change, and most definitely that is an area where we need to find a pathway. It's not an option. We need to clearly articulate what are the interim targets that we're seeking to achieve, and working with a broad range of stakeholders to get there. But I wanted to bring up another topic that relates to that, because I think it goes to the heart of the matter, which is around sustainability. And when you think about sustainability, it's often in the context of what do we do with the waste that we produce. But I'm encouraged by people who are working in manufacturing industries who are actually trying to deal with this as an issue prior to the waste being generated, before it's visible to us as society. And this is an area, picking up Michael's point, that we are in this amazing era of technology. You would be, and technology is a tool that will enable us to do things that we've not ever been able to do before. When you think about the manufacturing of anything, whether it's an aeroplane, to a TV, to the computer that I'm talking to you on, the degree of input of materials, of plastics, of rare earths, of a wide variety of inputs is amazing, and is often on a per kilo basis, 100 or a kilo to every, you know, I was going to say ounce, I'm mixing my metrics, but every gram of product requires at least 2 orders of magnitude greater inputs. And that's been our traditional manufacturing methodology, because of just the way that manufacturing has occurred. And it occurs in the chemistry industry as well as in the things that we use on an everyday basis. And so many companies are realizing that this is where they can really add value and contribute to our future, to our sustainable economy, by minimizing the inputs that are required into their finished products. And so this is an area where additive manufacturing, the use of digital technology to improve manufacturing methods, will really enable us to leapfrog current technologies and help us meet our sustainability targets. It will obviously also have an impact on climate change, because we're dealing with the problem from another angle. And perhaps I should finish up by, on that point, is that we need to approach the challenges that we're facing from a wide variety of different angles. And as young people, you will look at the world differently. You'll have a different experience. You we will be seeking as policymakers for greater inclusion of your voice in every public policy matter that our government will be considering. Because if there's one thing that I can give you absolute certainty on, and to encourage you to be optimistic about, is that we recognise a diversity of voices is absolutely essential in order for us not only to make good policy, but to communicate good policy And on that note, I just would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you, and look forward to the contribution that you'll be making to a better world for not only Melbourne and Victoria and Australia, but for the globe. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, a wonderful, wonderful speech. And if we can show our appreciation with those emojis. Amanda, this, again, this recurring theme of solutions, through innovation. And I love the way you're saying we don't actually necessarily know where the solutions are going to come from, but we must stay solution focused. Right? And staying solution focused will bring that hope and that optimism that is needed, and the solutions will be found. You've said so much for us there. Time-wise, we are going to need to move on, but I'm hoping we might have a smidgen of time for people, if they do have questions of Amanda. And you can see in the chat there, Amanda, everyone's just loving what you were saying. Please ask Amanda questions in the chat as we continue on. So we are going to, sorry, I need to ask Zoe Kerwin, if you could just thank Amanda for us. Sorry, Zoe. Is Zoe there? You can unmute yourself.
Hi.
There you go. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you, Amanda, so much for sharing that with us and talking about your own journey and how you went about seeking out opportunities, which I think is really helpful for all of us as we go about our careers. And also for talking to us about some of the challenges that really are at the forefront of our minds as young people, including in sustainability. We're very grateful for your time today.
Thank you, Zoe. Beautifully, beautifully said. And I hope Amanda can hear that sort of genuine, thanks, because you've really given our young people something to move forward with. So we'd like to introduce our lucky last speaker for this morning, Karen Sobels. And Karen is the president of the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Karen was appointed as president in 2019. She has over 30 years of experience in retail, telecommunications, and banking sectors.
Oh, okay.
She is the director of the publishing company Risk Info, and a principal of Business Advisors. She's a business owner herself and the chair of the Victorian Chamber's Small Business Task Force. So again, we are privileged to have such an extraordinary speaker with us. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much. And look, I'm under time pressure today, so I know you need to finish on time. But I did want to have a quick hello to two of my colleagues that I've noticed on the call, and that is Margie Stewart. Hi, Margie, and also to Julie Green. I'm sure we'll all get together again soon once we're out of lockdown. And also to Amanda Capples. Great to hear you speaking as well. And Amanda has worked with the Chamber in a great way to try and bring industry and business together in terms of science. And I always feel a bit of a mental pygmy when I'm talking to Amanda, but great to see you today. Yes, sadly, when I was asked to speak on this, I worked out that it actually wasn't over 30 years in business, it was 42, but I think we'll stick with the 30 as it turns out. I started work at 15 part-time, but I have done all of those other things as well. Some of you will ask, what does the Chamber do? But it's kind of it's a support mechanism for businesses. So we work in industrial relations, advocacy, international consulting, apprenticeship and apprenticeship management, export documentation, those sorts of things. The Chamber's been around since 1851. That makes it 169 years ago. And in that time, I'm the first female president of the Chamber, which makes me really proud. But what makes me even prouder is that since last year, we've had on our board of management 50% males and 50% females. So the Chamber's had huge changes, most of it coming in the last sort of few years of its life. But that leads me to what I want to talk to you about today. And I know it's about business, but for me, this is around what you need to do if you want to succeed in business and what business needs to do for the country. And that is about change. And that is about dealing with change, creating change, learning how to learn, and making sure that's the foundation for all the growth. When I was in high school, when I was growing up, my dad was a policeman. And so pretty much most of our friends were policemen. We moved from town to town. I didn't really understand what other careers there were out there. And when I was at school, everyone said to me, you're going to be a policewoman when you leave school. And I kind of didn't want to be because I'd seen it, but I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was kind of I didn't think it at the time, but pretty cloistered. My teacher said, well, you know, you're a smart girl, why don't you do law? I went, okay, we'll do law, as you do. So I applied for law at the end of my last year of school, pretty much like Amanda, didn't kind of really know. And then I hadn't quite worked hard enough, missed by 1 point. And that was a sliding doors moment for me because I went on to do a degree in communications, a Bachelor of Arts. And from there I went to become a management trainee at Myer. And I was there for a few years and it taught me great things about running a business, about the fundamentals that you need to have to run a business. I had found in doing that my ability to change and adapt to change wasn't great because I really had quite a narrow view of things. And what I did find out in the business space was the only way to succeed in business was to do better today at what you did yesterday and to do it better than the other guy who's your competition. Now, the only way you can do those things is to get new inputs into your brain, to inform yourself, to learn new things, to learn new skills. So I did lots of different things. I joined clubs, I joined Rotaract, which was like a young Rotary. Some of you might be involved in that. I joined clubs, I went out with different groups of friends. I played sport very badly, I must admit. In fact, one sport we played was softball because we liked the uniforms. And I volunteered doing things. I did a couple of volunteer things before I left school and then through university. And through that, I learned how to learn and I learned to change. And I did kind of often regret not doing the law part of it because I kind of like that advocacy part, which I'm sort of doing a little bit now. But when I started my traineeship with Myer, what's really interesting now is many of you won't have been into a Myer store ever because the world has changed and department stores didn't change with it. They were trying to compete against each other. They weren't getting enough inputs. And what's happened in the world is that the other guy, the competition, turned out not to be another store. It turned out to be the internet. And that's really changed the landscape. So people who think like yesterday don't make it to tomorrow. You need to be thinking differently. So what business needs to be successful is new minds, new ideas, different thinking, people who come from different backgrounds, different cultures, different university degrees. I've worked with people in all sorts of areas who have degrees that have nothing to do with that area because it's the ability to think differently, to seek different inputs and to not be scared of a different point of view. And I'll just go off a slight piece here is forget cancel culture. If you're not listening to what everyone's saying, you're not listening enough. You don't have to like it, but make sure you listen. Make sure you find out different things. Listen to a podcast that you don't normally listen to. Watch a TV program you don't need to listen to, you don't normally listen to. It doesn't have to all be university degrees. But opportunities exist for you out there, even in a COVID world. Last Sunday before last on Father's Day, I was in at Parliament House in Melbourne as they were making the announcements about locking Victoria down for another few weeks. That was a really tough day. That was really hard. And lots of businesses were contacting us and they were in despair. And there were some very, very upset people that couldn't see a way forward. And I've got to say that was a really, really tough day. But you can't lead from behind. You can only lead from the front. So the next day I got up, I hit my desk and I looked, hopefully optimistically, for what we could do, not for yelling about what we can't do. And a lot of what you see in the paper today is about people yelling about what we can't do. We need to focus on what we can do because you can't lead from behind. The whole landscape has changed, not just in business, but in life. And we've had this change forced upon us. So at the start of lockdown 1 back in March, I had a restaurateur say to me, I've got a really, 5-star high-end restaurant. I can't possibly do takeaway. This will kill me. They are now running an incredibly successful takeaway business. It's just going gangbusters. And when which is a technical term, when the markets open again, what we'll find is they'll probably keep doing that as well as their 5-star business. So what they'll have got is a jump in their business. We have unions who at the start of the year, before COVID became an issue, were saying we couldn't possibly have the person, the waitress who brings your plate to your table on the same award as the person who takes the plate away. That we just couldn't possibly do that. But when COVID hit, they jumped into the breach, they made the changes, they saved jobs and they saved businesses. It made a difference. And I guess last but not least, we had politicians who said we couldn't possibly have Parliament remotely. That's just not possible. And now lots of them are using Zoom, some more successfully than others. But also remember, life's not a straight line. 3 times in my life, I've taken backward steps financially to do a job that I really wanted to do. And that's really important. As Amanda said, you know, when you leave school, you'll often not know what you want to do or what your career is going to be. You just have to know what makes you happy. And when I look at what might be around for when you leave school, the career that you may end up loving probably doesn't even exist yet. And if that sounds really weird to you, let me tell you that when I was at school, there was no such thing as a fax machine, a personal computer, certainly no Netflix. There was not a DVD. When I was 15 and working at Woolworths, there wasn't even a thing such as a credit card. I know that's a bit mind-blowing, isn't it? There was certainly no mobile phones and there was definitely no internet. So in the middle of your career, what will exist that isn't existing now? And quite possibly, you'll be the one to create it. One of the things that you also need to think about when your career and business and what you're doing is the government's done a most recent intergenerational report, which is where they look at where things sit from generation to generation, which is sort of like 30-year blocks. And the last one they did was about 3 or 4 years ago. They found that basically looking back to the start of this century, there was 7.3 people of working age for every retired person. So between 15 and 64, 7.3 people for each person who's retired. That's 7.3 people who can work, pay taxes, help build infrastructure, schools, hospitals, pay for the lifestyle that we all have. By the time you're in the middle of your working life, that number will have gone from 7.3 to 2.7. That's a 60% reduction in productivity. And that's a whole lot less people there to pay taxes, to pay for all of those things that we enjoy now. So think about the issues that raises. And I call them issues, not problems, because we've solved them before and we'll solve them again. And we're working on projects now to say, what do we have to do to plan 20 or 30 years out? But here's the rub as well. Just because there's 2.3 people available to work, or as we call work availability, that doesn't mean they're participating in the workforce. When I started school, only 46% of women had a job. Today, 66% of women have jobs. If you've only got 2.3 people in the workforce availability per retired person, can you really afford to have some of those people not able to work? Not because they don't choose to, but because they come for all sorts of reasons. So when you think about things like childcare, if you think childcare is a women's issue, you are very wrong. If you think childcare is a young person's issue, you are very wrong. It's going to affect everybody. But that makes us think of other issues such as migration, population growth, population density. How do we deal with all of those things? They're the problems that you'll be solving. We need to make sure that everyone is working. You have a voice. You are leaders now, not just will be leaders, and you have to be the change. And just to prove that I kind of live my mantra about accepting change, I'll tell you that when I sold my first small business about 9 or 10 years ago, I did go back to university and I did get my master's in commercial law, and I loved every minute of it, albeit that I was very much the oldest person in the class by a long shot, but it was great fun and I really enjoyed it. So anything's possible as long as you embrace change. Make sure that in learning to learn and develop yourself, you're putting yourself in the very best possible position to make that happen. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Really, seriously, wonderful, wonderful talk. Fantastic advice, Karen. I love that question right at the beginning. What can business do for the community? Not sort of the other way around. We hear it too much the other way around too often. And then finishing up with this, you know, be the change, embrace change. Excellent advice. Look, we have gone just over 12 noon, and we did promise you we would be finishing at 12. I need to thank everyone, but just to let you know that many of you will have to shoot off. You've all got things to do, but Victor and myself and a few others will be staying on for a little bit longer. There was so much input in that chat, so many questions, so many great ideas. So if you would like to stay on for a little bit longer, but we will need to wrap everything up right now and let most people go. Just to say, there's been such a broad spectrum of knowledge with recurring themes, right, about being solution focused, about optimism. I need to point out these are intergenerational conversations. This is important. We're not just relying on the older generation. We're not passing the baton to the younger generation. We are solving this together across all generations, right? Coming back to Mandela, listen to all the attributes and qualities of Mandela, right? And the High Commissioner telling us he had very rare qualities. Well, let's make these qualities less rare. Let's learn how to do these things ourselves. If we admire him so much, why wouldn't we bring this into our own lives? And I'll leave you with that to work on. We need to thank all our wonderful guest speakers for sharing their knowledge, their experience and their wisdoms. And special, special thanks to Mr. Rashidi, Samailai and Victor Purton, because the two of them really have essentially brought this all together for you. You will receive a follow-up email with details for how to access the Future Voices website, how to stay notified of upcoming events. We will be inviting, you know, some of these speakers back to talk to you in more detail whenever we can. I'm going to throw to Cara Dooley-Heath, Melbourne University law student and Future Voices alumni, just to give us some final words. So Cara, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much, Marg. So look, I am aware of the time, so we'll be brief. But firstly, I just want to say thank you to everyone here today. As Marg said, it is an intergenerational issue. And I think the opportunities for things like breakout rooms today have provided us with an avenue to have those discussions with so many people with a wealth of knowledge and experience. So thank you everyone for participating in today's summit. And it's also very exciting that obviously, given the constraints of COVID, that we have been able to engage in a global initiative this year. So I think that's something that we do have to be grateful for, despite all the other challenges. And as Marg said, there are so many people who have put in a tremendous amount of effort behind the scenes to bring all of this together. So a huge thank you to all the sponsors of today's event, and in particular, the Centre for Optimism and the Gandhi Experiment, two of our major supporters, and also to Marg, Rashidi and Victor in particular. Thank you so much for everything that you've done and continue to do for the Future Voices students. Marg, thank you for your enthusiasm and also for being such an empowering Master of Ceremonies today. I think we've all really felt that. And to Victor, gosh, just listening to you speak, I think we'll all gain so much insight into optimism and can hopefully take that with us as we go about the rest of navigating these uncertain times. So thank you for your dedication and everything that you continue to do to try and reshape our attitudes into leadership and moving forward. And Rashidi, a huge thank you for your continued belief in young people. I think honestly that if young people could sometimes see ourselves in the way that you do and the belief that you have in us, the world would be a much better place. So thank you. Honestly, the work that you do in particular in the Shepparton region, but also in Australia and now globally is tremendous and incredible. So we are all very grateful and benefit from all of that. And to all the young people here today, thank you for participating. Thank you for showing up. We know that it is genuinely a very challenging time and uncertain circumstances that we find ourselves in, particularly for those of you completing things like VCE. But honestly, that what you're doing today and the skills that you're learning, as has been spoken to throughout this summit, will put you in really good stead for going forward and for being those leaders that we so desperately need. So please take heart from what you've heard and go out there into your own communities and put into practice everything that you've heard from today's speakers. So thank you again to all our terrific speakers and for sharing all those nuggets of wisdom that we really can hold on to during these challenging times. So thank you.